Hi. So, the review of the day is for Dorsai by Gordon R Dickson. This is an absolute classic of science fiction. If you are inclined toward reading 100 science fiction you must read before you die, or best of science fiction, or those sorts of lists, you will almost certainly find Dorsai on most of them, at least most of those that concentrate on classic science fiction rather than modern day. So this novel was originally published as a serialized form in a magazine, and I think it was probably Astounding Science Fiction in the late 50s. It was then revised and published again in the 60s under a different title. It was The Genetic General, which makes a lot of sense for the main character, which is Donald Graham. It was then edited and played around with and went back and forth, and it was finally published under its own title, Dorsai by Dor, in 1976, which I very much suspect is the very volume I hold in front of you. This is a much older Dor. If you know about that sort of thing more than I, you can see that it's got some sort of serial number in the upper corner there. It says UE 1342. One day I'm going to have to find out what those UEs are. And the price is listed as $1.75, which I just find utterly adorable. Going forward, it's not in great condition. Those of you who are book collectors probably won't love this, even if it is a first edition. You can see on the spine it's a bit faded and it's creased. The pages and cover have a lot of foxing. The pages themselves are actually quite toasty brown. But it is first printing February 1976. And I think it's a really beautiful edition. For a start, you've got that artwork on the cover, which I really think is great. That whole red theme gives an excellent background to what the story is about. And it's got those rather nice Art Deco corners to the illustration, which give it a bit of extra pizzazz. The cover art is by Paul Lehr, and though it doesn't actually say, I expect he probably did this rather cute little black and white drawing on the inside of the cover as well. So I'm very happy with this edition. I bought it fairly recently. It might have been part of the huge November book haul last year. It's been on my shelf for a while. I finally got around to it. Glad I did. I haven't read this book since I was in my teens. Now, I remember really enjoying this in my teens. It is your classic military sci-fi, and I like military sci-fi. In fact, Dorsai and Starship Troopers by Heinlein are credited as being the first novels that actually kicked off the whole military sci-fi tradition. And I read Dorsai as a teenager and loved it. I didn't actually encounter Starship Troopers until I was at least in my 30s, and I really do enjoy that book. I have it and I reread it recently. I was excited to reread this one. I was disconcerted as I started reading it. I wasn't loving the beginning. For a start, in the beginning especially, it becomes really obvious that this was serialized and has been conglomerated together. So our first chapter is Cadet, and then we go into Mercenary, and then there's Mercenary 1, Mercenary 2 as he climbs the ladder. And eventually with War Chief. Things get better from there. He increases after War Chief. But the thing is, that first one, the Cadet, it's clumsy. I'm not going to lie. So this is the one where the author introduces us to his main character, who is the main character. He carries the whole story through. He is the theme of this whole book, and probably, I imagine, of the second as well. Donald Graham is just about to become a mature adult Dorsai when we encounter him. And it's this sequence where he's wandering around, staring up at the sky meaningfully, wondering about why he's so unusual and unlike everyone else. And that's fine. it's a theme. It's a theme that people keep doing because it works to set up your character as a bit of an unusual character and give you the backstory. But in 2024, that feels clumsy. I'm sure that back in the 80s, which was probably when I first read it, I was a young enough reader that I enjoyed it, and because he was the main character at that stage was a teenager and I was a teenager, I was probably much more on board with it. Less so now. Anyway, he becomes an adult and he goes out into the stars, and by now we've been told that Dorsai is a whole planet full of its main export being military. All the guys go into the military, the women, of course, written in the 50s. I'm sure they give birth to warriors. That's okay. Anyway, we're introduced to the universe basically by Donald Graham, sitting around the adult table with the males of his family for the first time as an equal adult. There's his father, there's his older brother, there's his two uncles, and we find out a little bit about how their society basically exports warriors because their planet is impoverished and all they've got. And over the course of the book, we learn more about the universe that Dickson has created for us. So you've got Dorsai, which produces the best of the best, the hardest of the hard, the most warrior-like of the warriors. You've got a whole heap of planets that are called the exotics, for reasons I never really understood, but they seem to have a more mythic, more spiritual attitude. There's a whole heap of other planets. I've got to say that in terms of galaxy building, Dickson doesn't do a spectacular job, in my opinion. You know, there's all these different planets out there. Numerous times, Donald or someone else will tell us the interconnectedness of these planets and how they're warring on each other and why they're warring on each other and what the political stuff behind it is. But I never really emerged with a really clear vision of all this, even after Donald had been on a number of these planets. The other thing about this, military sci-fi, sure, but it doesn't really concentrate on the militaristic side of it. There isn't actually action like you would see in Starship Troopers, or if we're going to look at good military SF, I'm going to say Joel Rosenberg's Masada series probably was strongly inspired by this, but it did all the things that I like better. Tanya Huff's military sci-fi or space opera, if you prefer, really good. You've got excellent battles. We've got a couple of small skirmishes here, but basically we're concentrating on Donald, how far-seeing and what an amazing commander he is, and how he's got that extra gene, which is why he got called the Electric General in a different version. It's all about the strategic and the political background stuff. And as such, it's good. It takes a long time to warm up because we start with Donald as a boy, and he has his little skirmish as a force leader, and then he goes and is employed by someone else. But all the way through this book, the story arc has as a main anti-protagonist William of Ceta, Donald encounters him on his first voyage out. There's this awkward scene where some woman's trying to destroy a contract. He takes the contract. He finds that she's one of the exotics, and she's contracted to this William of Ceta, who's a very powerful man on his own homeworld of Ceta, but all through the galaxy in various ways. Donald instantly recognizes him as the bad guy. I don't know, maybe he was wearing a black hat or something at the time. Or maybe these amazing genetic influences let him recognize a bad guy on sight. So this William of Ceta becomes the primary antagonist for our protagonist throughout. And of course he's proven right, and the guy does some bad things. Surprising no one, Donald of course overcomes and wins the day. The ending's a pretty good ending, and I'm going to say that by about a third of the way through, it feels as if Dickson had really found his feet, and instead of it feeling like slightly awkward and unintegrated chapters in a serialization. It started to feel like a real novel that was really going somewhere, with a main character that you can see maturing and evolving and becoming more interesting, events that are contributing to the galactic situation, and so it's pretty good. I guess overall I'd give this book a 3 out of 5. That's Goodreads stars, 5-star review type thing. Maybe 3.5, because the beginning is so awkward and it lacks sophistication, and it also sells itself as the classic novel of the ultimate soldier, but there isn't a lot of soldiering. You've got a lot more politicking, and the Dorsai may be renowned throughout the galaxy as the most amazing warriors, but we're never really shown that, we're just told that. And you've got this thing where Donald eventually attracts other Dorsai around him that help him in his plans to defeat the bad guy of the universe. And they've got their whole shy Dorsai, real Dorsai thing happening. But again, we don't really see any of this military thing. Donald thinks through a few situations very cleverly, and he does the unexpected in a way that will win battles, and does. And I love the thought-inducing behind the campaigns. I love the politicking that Dickson has written into this universe, even if he hasn't written it terribly clearly. It is a good book. I like it. I feel like I would probably benefit from rereading it again in maybe 6 or 7 months. I think I would probably enjoy it more on the reread, because with this read I kept trying to find my feet with what was happening, and it was only about halfway through that the book really started coming together for me, and I think that was the writing as much as me. So yeah, Donald Graham is a surprisingly good character for one of those impervious, best of the best warrior type characters, which many books give us. Donald's a pretty good one. A lot of what he does and how he does it is interesting. It's explained, but it's not over-explained. His long-term passion for a woman who hates him, Andrea? No, I'm pretty sure it's Ania. The one who asks him to destroy the contract. This long-term attraction he has for is pretty bizarre and a bit embarrassing, but it's 50s, so, you know, whatever. In small ways, Dickson has made a very nuanced book. So the contract, we learn more about the contracts. The whole galaxy works on contracts, and these things are more individual than a crystallized mineral, and they're almost impossible to destroy. The whole universe operates on them. And later, when war is being brought to all the planets by this William of Seer in his attempt to basically become ruler of the galaxy, the essence of that is labor force. And that's a lot of nuance, and it's very interesting. For the time it was written, I think that Dickson was actually doing something quite extraordinarily social, political, speculative. So I appreciate all that. But going into this book knowing that that's what it's going to be about, rather than about some battle story, that's an advantage, I think. Okay, what else? We've got the main character, Donald Graham. One of his uncles appears later on for reasons that remain mysterious. He's just this cardboard cutout. And I've got to say that Dorsai does have a problem with cardboard cutout characters. You don't have a lot of background on most of them. And that dates it. Basically, the lack of characterization, the lack of strong galaxy building. Small world building is great. Big galaxy building, not so great. These are the things that date this book, and it has dated quite a bit. On the other hand, you've got that incredibly nuanced writing about things like the contract scheme, the way the politics of the world work. So overall, I'm nearly talking myself into giving it 4 stars here. It probably does deserve at least 4 stars for the fact that it's writing something very fresh and imaginative for when it was written, and that it is well written. But I'm still going to hang in there with the 3.5 stars because of the clumsiness that it starts out with. Anyway, by now, probably some people who think this is the best book ever written want to say horrible things to me. So by all means, say horrible things to me in the comment section. Tell me how wrong I am. Tell me how this is the best book that was ever written in the history of the universe, if that's what you believe. But my feelings about it will remain quite unchanged. A good book. I'm glad I reread it. I have no doubts that it's a classic of SF, but it's still not the best written one I've ever read. Now, I do actually have the second Dorsai novel sitting there on my bookshelf. Right in front of me, in fact. That's also a door. It's in better condition than the first. It's virtually unread. Though I'm going to say the illustration on this is far superior. Much more beautiful artwork than here. Am I going to read it? I'm not throwing myself into it, I've got to say. Oh, this is the first store printing as well. 1978. Probably got them together. And probably whoever I got them from also thought this was better and reread it more often than this. Will I read it? Yes, probably eventually, but I'm not going to hurry into it. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm probably going to reread Dorsai in a few months, see how I feel about it then, and then probably go straight on to the Necromancer, in which case I'll probably review them together. Thank you very much for watching this rambly, largely unprepared video. Normally I take notes. I didn't while I was reading this one. And thank you for watching. Next book I'm planning on reading, I'm moving away from science fiction once again into the true crime realm, but never fear, science fiction will come again. Thanks for watching. Read good books. Tell me I'm wrong about this book if you want to. Go right ahead. I don't mind at all.